Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how it's now looking like Nintendo has some huge online plans to reveal during the Switch 2 Direct, and this might even include Gamecube for Nintendo Switch Online. I know, we've been waiting for this for a very long time, and it might actually be happening this time. So we're getting into that and other exciting things regarding the Switch 2 and its online features today. But before going forward, let me take this moment to point out that I am aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers by the time the Switch 2 launches. So if you find yourself enjoying my content, I would appreciate it if you could subscribe and hit that notification bell. So when it comes to GameCube coming to Nintendo Switch Online, this is something that we have been talking about for a very long time. And when I say we, I mean the Nintendo fan. We've been hoping and praying, and there have been rumors and discussions. We've wanted this for such a long time. There have been some GameCube games that have been remastered, and because of that, it has felt like maybe Nintendo will wait on GameCube for NSO because they have this treasure trove of quality games that can go back to, remake, or remaster, and they can be quality releases. But it now looks like we have something that is strongly suggesting that GameCube may indeed be coming to NSO very, very soon, but for Nintendo Switch 2. Which I'll just say kind of makes sense. It felt like something we might not see on Switch 1, but on Switch 2 could be a feature that would come down the road, but what we're seeing here might actually be suggesting it's happening sooner than later. And so originally this information was found by Lick on Fami boards, but here Pokemaniac summarizes what's been going on. So there's this FCC filing, and it has the product code for BEE, which is not for Switch, but for Switch 2. And as we see here in the image file, it shows where the label would be on the controller on the rear. And so what's interesting about this is that, well, that matches up to exactly to how the GameCube controller would be shaped. If we're talking about the rear side, the label would be right here, as we see with this image, how they overlaid it. But what makes this more interesting is that this controller does not have NFC functionality, which means it's not a Switch 2 Pro controller, but because it has the code of BEE as opposed to HAC, this is a Switch 2 controller of some kind, but not a Pro controller, and yet its label on the back matches to how a GameCube controller would be. So the seeming implication here is that this FCC filing is for a GameCube controller specifically for Switch 2. Now, why does this mean that it's happening soon? Because we've seen different trademarks and patents and different things over the last few years that have led us to believe that maybe something GameCube could be happening down the road. The reason why this is a bigger deal is because with FCC filings, oftentimes when we see them filed publicly, it amounts to something announced relatively soon, like within a few weeks. One great example, Nintendo Alarmo. Just a few months ago, we saw an FCC filing for this interesting device that was something that could fit in the palm of your hands, that had technology that could measure movements, and then just a few weeks later, Nintendo announced Nintendo Alarmo, a technology that could fit in the palm of your hands that measures movements in your sleep. And so what is a few weeks from now? The big Nintendo Switch 2 Direct. So it might be the case that there will be a segment during the Switch 2 Direct where Nintendo highlights or details their new, improved online plans for Switch 2, and that may include Nintendo GameCube coming to Nintendo Switch Online for Switch 2 owners, and there will be a GameCube controller that will be coming out as well if you want to use that to play these games. Now, I do have questions about this GameCube controller. Are the shoulders analog like the original GameCube controller, or are they going to be simply digital? Because if they're digital, then games like Mario Sunshine, F-Zero GX, and others that took advantage of the analog triggers will still need to be adapted somewhat here. And then the other thing to consider here is that regardless, these games will still have to be adapted because unless the Switch 2 controllers all have analog triggers, which I really doubt based off what we've seen so far, they're going to still need to make sure that the GameCube games for NSO will be playable on the other Switch 2 controllers. So maybe this GameCube controller does have analog triggers and everything else is just digital, although I'm going to lean in the direction of nothing being analog. It's all going to be digital, and they're just going to have some adaptations on the NSO app for GameCube that allow for these different GameCube games to work. We saw Mario Sunshine worked on 3D All-Stars for Switch, so I imagine something very similar would be done for all the different GameCube games on NSO. Now, while I do feel like this is probably the strongest evidence we've ever had for GameCube yet, it should be noted that we are making the assumption it's GameCube related because of how this label was portrayed. It might be the case there could be a different kind of controller that just coincidentally has a similar layout for where the label would be. But also, at some point or another, you gotta think that GameCube is going to come to Switch Online, and Nintendo likely will be revamping their online services for Switch 2, and so perhaps they're going to want to do everything they can, or do some of the more meaningful things, to get people excited and eager for Switch 2 online services, and GameCube might be a really great way to do that. So I guess we'll see what shows up in the Switch 2 Direct a few weeks from now. But there are other things going on that lead us to think that Nintendo has more to reveal about their online services. So there is this patent that came up recently for proximity chat. And essentially what this is that you can be exploring a game, let's say a game with a large expanse. So it's not just one small space, but a larger space, where if you're far away from someone else who's playing in the same world at the same time, if you're not within earshot, you're not going to hear them. But once you reach a certain proximity, then you are within earshot and you can then hear them. And so this is an interesting mechanic we've seen in other games, but not in Nintendo games, and so it's kind of exciting to see that Nintendo is at least considering this kind of idea, because again, this is a patent. It doesn't mean 100% that it's going to materialize into anything, but the fact that they are doing something like this not only suggests that they are looking into having proximity chat for their different games, but that also they are looking into having voice chat, because in order to have proximity chat, you need to have voice chat. And there's already been a widespread belief that the extra button on the Switch 2 Joy-Con has to do with some sort of enhanced communication features, perhaps a group party chat with different Switch Online members. And so if that's the case, then definitely you need to have a more dedicated solution for voice chat, and not just the poor, paltry Switch Online app that just worked for like 1 or 2 games that didn't even work well. It needs to be basically how it works for Nintendo's competitors, where you just have a headset and it works with your controller, and there you go, there's really no issues. And perhaps even within the operating system itself, there are different ways to communicate with your friends and such. And so I think this is a big deal for a variety of reasons. One big reason is that if the Switch 2 is indeed going to have improved levels of third-party support, especially with big AAA games, well, voice chat is a standard. So having an integrated quality voice chat system on the Switch 2 would make a lot of sense for third-party support, but also if Nintendo is truly going to modernize and adapt to the overall expectation for how gaming should work with online, then they should also be doing this. But how might proximity chat benefit different Nintendo games? Well, we know that Mario Kart is likely coming out very early on for Switch 2, given that they've already shown it in the first look trailer, and that's a game that's known for its multiplayer and even its online multiplayer. So with Switch 2, I'm kind of thinking that they're going to showcase improved online multiplayer, especially with Mario Kart, especially if it's a day one title, and having voice chat's going to make sense. But what about proximity chat? Would proximity chat make sense in this case? Well, with Mario Kart for Switch 2, as we've already seen, there are going to be 24 characters in a track at a time. That's going to be a lot of people. And so if all 24 people are speaking at the same time when they're right next to each other, that might be kind of hectic. But let's say once you've distanced yourself a little bit, perhaps with proximity chat, you will only hear so many people at a time, if you so choose. I'm sure you can mute people like you can in any other game with voice chat. But there could be some extra fun to be had there. Let's say a friend, as they approach you, is slowly saying, I'm coming for you, I'm getting closer, and they are indeed getting closer. That could be thrilling. And that kind of idea could translate to something beyond Mario Kart, maybe something more like Luigi's Mansion multiplayer, where it's a little bit more spooky, where there could be some more gameplay centered around chasing around and such. Or maybe Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is going to have some multiplayer. Recently we talked about of how apparently this game is going to blow a whole bunch of other Switch 2 games out of the water in the Direct, and if that's the case, how exactly are they going to go about doing that? Might have something to do with Metroid Prime 4 having some expanded modes like an online multiplayer, and if so, would proximity chat maybe benefit that game? What if it's not just multiplayer, but maybe something more like Federation Force where you're playing online with teams? And if that's the case, maybe depending on where you are on the map, the proximity chat could kick in there. That's a possibility, but where I think this technology would make the most sense is actually the Nintendo Online playtest game that they tested a few months ago that I cannot share even a single blurred image of, or they will take down this video. But that was a game where you could explore an open world, building up these different structures, and there could be other people there, and perhaps some people will be far away, so you won't be able to communicate with them, but as you get closer, the proximity chat would kick in. You can then talk to them. And so his patent might not even necessarily have to do with a Switch 2 game, because this playtest program game was playtested on Switch 1, but of course voice chat isn't really a thing for most Switch games, so that's what leads me to believe this is more so for Switch 2. Maybe voice chat works on the Switch 2 version of the game and not the Switch 1 version, or maybe there never is going to be a Switch 1 version because it was just a playtest and the real full product will only be on Switch 2. There's a lot of different possibilities here for how they'll go about doing it. It's also possible it will come to both systems, and they'll simply find a way to have voice chat on the Switch 1 version as well. There are games that do have voice chat, such as Fortnite, for example, so it can be done. It's just not something that's done on a system level, and it's few and far between. Now, I will point out there's this other patent that's come up that also seems to have to do with the playtest program, and people have noticed the inventors of this project here: Tsubasa Sakaguchi, Yusuke Amano, Masaki Wada, and Shinya Yano. These are Nintendo developers that have worked on games like Splatoon and Ring Fit Adventure, so there is experience with online multiplayer games there, as well as more unique, innovative games like Ring Fit Adventure. I never got a chance to actually play this playtest program game, so I do hope that it does eventually come out. I think it's very likely that it will. Why else would they be playtesting this? Some people might say they would just to test out different ideas and concepts, but to use in a future game and not necessarily what we saw. But while that may be possible, we did see within the game that there was already clearly some intention to have eventual microtransactions to some extent. So that suggests that there was a plan to have this be a full-on game available to the public eventually. So I do think this is going to happen. We're seeing more and more patents that seem to be related to it, so I think it is going to come out, and it's probably something that's being saved for Switch 2, because likely they do want to have voice chat involved here. Voice chat seems to be something that's going to be more involved with Switch 2, and a lot of games are going to be taking advantage of it, including this playtest program game, and we might even see it in the Switch 2 Direct. So I am very eager to see the future of Nintendo Online with games like Mario Kart, Splatoon, maybe Metroid Prime 4, although that may just be a single player game. We'll see what happens with that one. But this online playtest program, there's a lot of Nintendo games that could really benefit from having proximity chat and just an overall better online voice chat system. So it's going to be nice to see Nintendo catch up to the modern standard. And it's going to be even nicer if GameCube does come to Nintendo Switch Online. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.